Hello, everybody. We are Universal Heart Wisdom, and we want to say hello to you. We love our audience. We love you. We hope that you will let other people know to get on and watch. And we have different guests every week. So I'll tell you about the show and myself, and then Kamela, my co-host, will introduce herself, and then we will introduce our amazing guests. So we are sponsored by the Love Coach Academy, and this was created by Scott Katamas, and we're all about compassionate communications, empathy, emotional intelligence, nonviolent communications, and just we have wonderful empathy groups, and we have shows every day. So I created Universal Heart Wisdom to be on Thursday like this, and it's all about exploring daily practices that awaken and empower our heart, mind, body, and soul. And we invite on awesome guests. Mm-hmm. I am Deborah Haviland, a love coach with the Love Coach Academy. I'm also a healthy lifestyle coach. I work with nutrition and exercise. I've been a lifetime dancer, yoga teacher, retreat leader. So I'm all about how we do our life. How are we grounded in our body? What are we putting in our mouths? What is coming out of our mouths? That's where compassionate communications and all these skills come into play. So I'm so happy to be here with you. And Kamela, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, it's Kamela Love. I go by Kamela Peace on Facebook, and I, like Deborah, am a love coach with Love Coach Academy, and very excited to be co-hosting our show today. We'll be talking about some really fun topics with a good friend of mine, Staci. Mm-hmm. I am a love coach, like I said. I do transformational relationship coaching, and I specifically work with folks in LGBT relationships and other alternative relationships. And I incorporate Sufi healing techniques into my work and a lot of communication and conflict resolution techniques into my work. So I can really help couples and folks in relationship through the conflicts, the challenges that they're having. And I work with other family relationships too. So parents with teenagers or siblings dealing with challenges with each other. Really any familial relationship is part of my clientele. So shall I introduce our speaker?
Yes, and I just before you do that, I want to say, because we both work in this arena, that we both as love coaches work with families, groups, businesses, individuals. And I actually met Kamela through the Sufi University of Spiritual and Medical Healing. So we're both also healers in that very, very deep practice of healing. So thank you. And please introduce our guest.
All right. We're delighted today to be joined with Staci Haines. And Staci is in Oakland, California, and she's a national leader in the field of somatics, focusing on the independence of personal and social change. She's also the co-founder of an organization where she works called Generative Somatics. And that organization brings this work to social and climate justice movements. She recently published a book called The Politics of Trauma, Somatics, Healing, and Social Justice, which explores healing personal and social trauma and building collective resilience. So as you can tell, we have some pretty cool topics to discuss ahead of us today. Thanks for joining us, Staci.
Yeah, delighted. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so what is somatics? Can you describe what you mean by somatics and why it is more than just paying attention to your body?
Yeah, for sure. So somatics really, I think it'll make sense to you and also your audience that somatics isn't kind of the body add-on to other things. Really, it's a shift in paradigm. So, one way that we talk about the soma is it's our thinking, it's our emotions, it's our sensing, it's our actions, our non-actions, and how we relate, that all of those are what we call an embodied phenomena. So when we're actually looking at somatic transformation, we're really transforming what's embodied in us, right? I often think of somatic healing as you know how we have a physical immune system? I often think of somatics and kind of a coming back into the life of the body, right? Of opening the blocks in the body or the soma, right? To be able to heal and transform. I often think of somatics as kind of our spiritual immune system.
Yeah.
As we come back into full embodiment, it actually helps us heal, transform, and it wants to reharmonize us. So, yeah. So somatics, very different paradigm. And I really appreciate how kind of in the US and in the West, we're moving from a more disembodied culture to having more body awareness. But somatic transformation is really a whole different way to look at who we are and how we change.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I just saw Kamela disappear. Sorry, that was an authentic response.
That's good.
My friend just did it. Okay. I'm very natural and very authentic, but
we're working through
so
some feedback sounds. I'll try to fix it, everyone.
You know, I want to say to our audience, we're all doing the best with technology. Really, we are like healers, therapists, lawyers, and all this stuff. And then there's technology. Okay, so technology happens. So we have to have a lot of empathy and compassion, right? Or for ourselves with it. Okay. So yeah, so I love what you're saying, Staci. I love it. All about somatics. And Kamela, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so it's really exciting to dive more into the somatics of it. My first question is in relationship to social change. So how do you connect embodied movement and embodied transformation with social change? Because we don't usually see that connection. And I think it's one of the unique parts of your work.
Thank you. Yeah. I love this part. So I'm going to say it in pieces because once the bridge is built, it seems so obvious, but sometimes building the bridge takes a minute. One thing we talk about in kind of how somatic transformation happens is kind of these three circles. One is a circle of somatic awareness. So we're deepening our somatic awareness to become almost more in touch with the language of the body, right? There's so much information coming through energy, pulsation, contraction, numbness, and that whole language, we want to listen to that. So somatic awareness is a big component of the work. Then we look at somatic practices. So one of our kind of phrases that we use is we become what we practice. We're always practicing something. And is what we're practicing actually aligned with our vision and our values? And one of the things we'll also see is there's a lot of important practices in life that life might not teach us, or our life experience might not teach us, like what you all are doing is giving and receiving love. That is a somatic practice. And, there's a way where we can open our chest, we can find a good ground, we can become more permeable, we can extend our love more forward. We would look at that as all of a somatic practice that we can do on purpose and learn and deepen our competency. The third thing we really look at is something called somatic opening. And I can talk about that maybe a little bit more in our conversation, but somatic opening is really taking the places where we've congealed, contracted, numb, which are usually pretty good survival reactions from what our life experiences are, but they really get in the way of everything, right? Of full expression, of being deeply connected to ourselves, of taking really effective action to make differences for other people. So somatic opening is a big part of how we work. Now, how all of that relates to social change is also inside of this model. We look at that all of this is always happening inside of a social context. Like we can't not be in a social, economic, and cultural context. It's just like the water we're swimming in. And so even things in society, like a lot of what we're dealing with right now, like a very poorly dealt with pandemic, white supremacy and racism, and how much that is really coming to the foreground again in a new wave, right? The different waves of Me Too and sexism and sexual assault, right? All of that, whether we believe in it or not, is also impacting and shaping us. So we literally embody the social conditions in which we live, even when we don't believe in them. So that's one of the connections really between a deep personal kind of transformation and social. And then what we see is, of course, those of us who really care about equity, who care about love for all people and all beings, or who work for social change, we've all also been impacted by those same systems, often impacted by some forms of oppression and trauma. And those, it's almost like in the be the change you seek, we need to continue to heal, to continue to develop what we call embodied leadership, deep empathy, right? To actually lead social change well. So it's one of the reasons we really decided to focus in on social justice and climate justice, is like supporting the change makers, being transformed, being more whole, being more connected, means that also the change that we're advocating for, seeking, helping to create is more aligned with our vision and values. So did any of that make sense?
Yes, that made awesome sense. It's
okay.
I've been really noticing that, with so many people. There is our somatics, and then our community somatics, or our family somatics, and our nation is going through so much with the pandemic and also with this election. So there is an underlying anxiety, and how people are dealing with it in different ways is, So that's a big discussion in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that would also be, what can people do to, when there is a lot of stress around, and when there is so much going on, how can we keep up our resilience and not do a spiritual bypass, but really deal with what is real?
Yeah, I love that. I have to say, since the pandemic, all of the protests and uprisings, right, around social justice, racial justice, mm-hmm. and police killings, and then the election in the US, I have to say, in all my years, I've been doing this a long time now. I mean, I'm 25 years in this work. I have never seen more collective anxiety sustained for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
That is a really big deal, right? And because it's also global, with the pandemic global, and the impact of the US on many other nations too. So I've been in this question a lot, and I really have two responses to it. One is somatically based, kind of processing through anxiety or processing through stress. Mm-hmm. And if you want to, we can do one of those. It's just a simple practice. And the other is really, how do we find and increase our resilience? So first of all, I want to talk about the difference between resilience and spiritual bypass. And I'm so interested if you all talk about this in your work too.
Yes.
But resilience, from a somatic point of view, we really understand that we're inherently resilient. Like we have this inherent impulse toward wholeness, toward interdependence, toward being connected with what's greater than us. And but it's an embodied experience. So we'll talk about increasing our resilience even by remembering an experience that was highly resilience giving, evoking that again, really feeling what it does inside of your body and soma, and letting it kind of spread out into the rest of your body, almost like a meditation, that it becomes a very simple daily resilience practice. And then we also turn it into external resilience. Like for me, I was raised at like 9,000 feet in the Rockies.
Oh.
Very high up.
Beautiful.
And, there's like 1,000 people in my hometown. So nature was way, way bigger than people.
That's nice.
It was nice. It was very nice, actually. I was like, that gave me a lot of
nature. I love nature.
Me too. But nature, pine trees, mountains, like the night sky are very resilience giving for me. So I both will evoke those and just kind of let it simmer through my whole body. But I also try to get out in nature as much as I can. So keep inputting new resilience experiences. And, you know, there's great research around resilience at this point, like art, music, dance, big resilience factors, ceremony, collective practice, big resilience factors, nature, animals, right? And connection with others. Right? So even when we have a really nice connection, feel it and let it linger and let it spread in us, right? To just keep, in some ways, nourishing our nervous system toward connection and toward aliveness. Yeah.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's, I've been using it a lot through this time.
You know, I'm just thinking, and then I want to hear more. I'm with the minute you said that, a place in nature, I instantly was at the birthing pools on Maui, where the women used to go and birth, and it's near Walo, and just the water and the birds and the nature. And then I'm thinking, I also led llama treks in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, up in the Wind River Range, you know, being in 8 days at a time. To me, even here, just dancing or doing water aerobics or taking a walk in nature, and growing up in New England, I had that same feeling of mountains and evergreen and the smell of the lakes. You know,
Exactly.
Thank you for bringing us back to that. Maybe we'll do a meditation at the end, and you can lead us.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Kamela, what about you? What are some of the things that bring you resilience? Kamela, can you hear us?
Unmute.
There we go. I don't know why it was on mute. So sorry, everyone. I'm having some feedback on my device today, so I'll be on mute when I am not speaking. And sorry for the feedback, but here we go, rolling with it. Well, I love that you mentioned ceremonies, Staci, and rituals. Those are really important to me. I do different group rituals and ceremonies. Just recently, we did a new moon goddess circle, really of the red tent tradition, which is a female gathering. And I really enjoy many different ritual group gatherings like that, many where we're really tuned into the natural flows of nature, the new moons, the full moons. And I'm interested, actually, if you would dive a little deeper into that bit. Why and how does community and ritual build resilience?
Yeah. First of all, that's so great that you do that, because you know, I really look at that as a collective practice of resilience. So there's things that we can do on our own, and then there's purposeful practice that we can bring into our family, or our teams, or of course in our community. And I mean, it's so interesting. You all know this, but if we look at the practices that have always been a part of human tradition, and of course they look very different cross-culturally, we've always had drumming, we've always had dance and movement, and we've always had ritual, and we've always had storytelling. Those pieces and art, right? These pieces are so deep in us, and so like there's some life-affirming cycle that gets to happen in them. But when I look at ritual, because ceremony and ritual is also very important to me, it is a very deep place of resilience, and also, you know, learning, healing, all the things that gets to happen in ritual. But like, first of all, we're coming together with a joint purpose, right? So we're putting all of our attention together, right, toward a positive purpose. And attention is very strong, you know, then usually we'll be in a joint practice, and that might be a chanting practice, it might be a movement practice, it might be a meditation or prayer practice. So then we're in joint practice together. Now, somatically, how we look at that is we're literally aligning our somas, right? People that practice together bond together, right? So when we start breathing together or chanting or moving together, we're literally, how I talk about it is, we start to enter a collective body or a collective soma. And then we start to harmonize around a joint intention. It's one of the reasons I think collective practice is so, so powerful. And obviously in kind of mainstream US culture, is highly individualistic, and we don't have a lot of those. And I think it is actually part of our collective suffering. But the places that we can find it and can build that, and of course, you know, all of us within our cultural traditions have it, just some of us are more disconnected from it and some of us more connected. But there's this great piece of research I want to tell you about too. There's a woman, her name is Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela. She's a South African psychologist who was a part of the Truth and Reconciliation process. She wrote a book called, which really everyone should read, it was amazing. It's called A Human Being Died That Night, a South African story of forgiveness. Very, very powerful. She still does a bunch of research and lead stuff. I'm very focused on kind of traditional healing methods out of South Africa. But in the research that she did, and this is also upsetting too, so I'm just forewarning in here. The research is good, but the context is upsetting. So during the apartheid regime in South Africa, there were obviously a lot of political assassinations of activists, right? Like the government would come in, assassinate activists in a community and leave. So what she found is she looked at those communities, and the communities that after the political assassinations came together, moved, drummed, talked, danced, the intra-community violence decreased, because it's almost like they took time to reset the collective body or the collective soma from trauma to resilience. In the communities where folks did not come together but kind of isolated and went off, the intra-community violence increased.
Wow.
It's such a powerful way to look at how important collective processing is and how important collective practice is.
You know, that is so important, because in Sebastopol, when we had the fires a couple of years ago, because I wasn't there for this cycle, but we called everybody together, and we were in a huge circus tent with, you know, a couple of hundred people, and we were sharing about our grief, and we went around and everyone got to speak, and it took all afternoon, and it was such a resetting and a bonding.
That's very, very powerful. So important.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And you're just reminding me that, like, I studied Angeles Arian a lot, and I did a graduation thing for my O-sensei teacher training. And I did, I worked with her cross-cultural healing symbols and created a ceremony, like a medicine circle, that was called Walking Our Talk and Dancing in Our Beauty. And I'm just thinking how, I mean, God, it was just remembered by people like forever.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And at Tufts, they had an independent study for junior year, and I did it all about ceremony and ritual. So I'm loving what you're saying. It's just such a reactivating how important this is.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Can I talk about spiritual bypass for a minute? Because I feel like this is especially important for those of us doing this work to be clear about that. So often in, you know, obviously I work a lot with trauma healing, and then collective trauma. But one of the things that can happen for two reasons, but is that sometimes through practice and sometimes through transformative practice and ritual, that people use it to get away from the body, right? Even in meditation, get away from the body, get away from pain, and do a spiritual bypass of really the very human experience. And that is much more of a dissociative response, right? When people are having often very powerful spiritual experiences, but dissociating to do that and trying to get away. And when we look at embodied resilience, resilience keeps inviting us to heal. Resilience actually, as we get more and more embodied, resilience will actually pull things up in us that need to be attended to. So there is this real connection between resilience and having to do our own work, between resilience and waking up socially, right? So anytime we see kind of spirituality or ritual or even resilience practice disconnected from a deeply embodied experience or disconnected from the social context. To me, we need to just gently start raising flags and going, hold on a second. Let's get here, both in our bodies and also get here in the what's actually happening in the world. Because at least from my view, and I guess we all share this, our healing and our transformative work, our ritual work, to me, always serves the healing of the whole. Always serves bringing more equity and justice. Always serves having us be in deeper right relationship with the planet. Right? It serves life. Yeah.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I totally agree. Totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kamela,
there we go. Okay. The mute sometimes not. It's finicky.
You're doing good.
That was such a beautiful, beautiful description of how we can use ceremony and ritual to lead us into greater connection to spirit and to have greater resilience. And then how embodiment also builds our ability to be resilient, because it naturally, in the process itself, brings up in us what needs to be healed and what needs to be changed. And, you know, I have a lot of embodiment practices in my life. I love dance. I love yoga. I love martial arts. I love biking and hiking and swimming, and recently started surfing. So I do all kinds of embodied things that connect me to nature and connect me to myself and connect me to my higher power. And I'm curious if you could share with us what it looks like in your organization, Generative Somatics. How does embodiment come in? I know you're a dancer, and I'm curious in real life, what kind of somatic work do you do, and how does that look?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So one of the things, just so you all know, so I was a co-founder of Generative Somatics, and then I was the executive director for 12 years, and I have just transitioned out of the executive director role. So it's also exciting and a lot of transition in there. But I always like to let people be current about where I'm at. So I'm, okay, it looks a lot of different ways. So one of the things that we do is we connect vision with practice. So there's a great distinction that came from my teacher when, you know, he said there's a way that you can have a performance body but not be embodied. And that can be true for a lot of dancers and athletes. It's like performance body is I can run really fast. I'm an endurance runner, or I'm an endurance dancer. I mean, I look at ballet. Ballet is not teaching you to be embodied. Ballet is teaching you a performance body, but mostly is also teaching you to dissociate because it's too painful, right? So when we talk about embodied, which I think is, Kamela, also what you were saying, is it's body-based practices, but where we're living inside of our senses, living inside of our skins, and the practice has a purpose. So one of the first things we always ask in the work, and this is what we do with people doing social and climate justice work, is we first craft what we call a declaration. Like, what's the future? What's the intended future of who you want to be as a leader, or the impact you want to have in your community or nationally or internationally? So there's always this vision that we're practicing toward. Then we might look at practices like we work with both individuals in programs and courses, but also work with organizations. So it might be in an organization that we teach a basic centering practice and everyone practices it together. And the purpose inside the practice is basically to be present, open, connected, and on purpose. But we're repeating that practice, doing it every day and doing it together. We have practices that are about how do you learn how to make a centered request, a centered decline, a centered offer, like literally the human skills of how do we navigate together and build stuff together, right? We teach a whole practice about being under accountable, over accountable, and centered accountability, right? So one of the things I always loved about somatics and why I've stayed so long is it's so deep and it's so pragmatic. It's like the most depthful things come out of the body. I think the body is a doorway to the stars. There's universes in here, and the more we open, the more of what I would call that spiritual earth connection gets to happen with and through us. And then it's very pragmatic. It's like, I know in my life with my experiences of trauma, I did not learn how to have a boundary. Forget it. I learned survival strategies and how to avoid things and how to duck and cover, or how, you know, when I got a little bit older, how to like just run through something, right? But none of that is a centered boundary that dignifies me and dignifies another person. I had to learn that, right? Or like relearning trust. That's a very big thing, right? Like, how do we learn to be trustworthy and to extend and grant trust? We hold all of those as embodied skills that we can relearn through practice. And the practice isn't just a psychological, I understand it now. It's literally a visceral retraining of the soma to go, I can tolerate more and more joy. I can stay present with more and more love. I can stay present with more and more complexity, right? But it's like, it's learning as a whole self and not just an idea, right? I don't even know if that answered your question, but I'm just riffing.
Yeah, that was really, I love that. I love that. How do we embody trust? I loved everything you said there. Wow. Making how did you say it? A grounded, centered, embodied request, or a boundary, or really being accountable, being and accountable. So important. I'm just thinking of when I did Qigong and martial arts and different things like that. In contact improv, we had to be responsible for our own body and the other body, you know, because you're having to dance in a safe way and follow a mutual point of contact through space and on the landscape of the other person's body. And, then becoming very body comfortable, you know, not projecting sexuality onto it, being able to dance with the other person's body and end up anywhere on their body, and being in beginner's mind. That was amazing when I was learning and teaching contact, and just an idea off the cuff. So you really did just talk about trauma, and we're also, you know, really exploring what is the relevance of these somatic practices right now. Do you have anything more to say about that?
Yeah. So somatics really, I mean, this is the funny thing is I feel like we're already a contradiction. Like, we're biologies that have this huge evolutionary wisdom in us. And then we are something so far beyond the biology, right? Like, if we're spirit incarnate, but both of those influences, that is us, right? So what I love is, in looking at evolutionary biology, we learn so much about the human form and the human function. And so somatics, that is really what somatics is trying to study, is like, what is this form and function in life, right? So somatics really understands that there are these three inherent human needs, and we're literally organized to adapt to them. So they are safety, right? Safety, like we track for and we're built to track for, am I safe, and are the people who I relate to safe? Belonging is the second one. We're social animals. And so it's like, do I belong? Can I love and be loved? Totally core need. And then the last one we talk about is dignity, right? Like dignity, like we thrive when we're dignified and we can dignify others. Yeah. And then of course we have our core needs of like clean food, clean water, housing, education, right? Like that, all those, the material needs. But when we look at safety, belonging, and dignity, if those are threatened or stressed in any way, we automatically organize ourselves in particular ways to adapt. Yeah. And trauma, whether it's individual experiences of trauma or social trauma, threaten safety, belonging, and dignity. You know, to me, why do Like we say Black Lives Matter, right? That's huge. Black Lives Matter. The safety of Black Lives Matter. The belonging of Black Lives Matter. The dignity of Black Lives Matter. We're talking about a whole group of people for hundreds of years not being granted safety, belonging, and dignity systemically. That is some shit. Like, we got to clean that stuff up.
Yes, majorly.
We've got to clean that up.
We got to transform.
Not to mention, it has also happened with women. Yeah.
Many. I mean, we can look class, race, gender, sexual orientation.
Every
whatever group, exactly. Whatever group is deemed less than. Yeah. And then their safety, belonging, and dignity is not taken care of. So the whole thing, the whole domination thing has to go. We just really have to get to equity in a very profound way, right? Yes. So what's to me so powerful about somatics is it so directly understands how we adapt to safety, belonging, and dignity, or the lack thereof, or the threat thereto. And then how those adaptations are so wise in the moment. But one of the things that happens in the soma, or the psychobiology, is once we have a strategy, we start to, and this is all unconscious, this is not our thinking mind, we generalize it. So if I I grew up with a very frightening and abusive dad. I adapted to be able to calm him down, right? Disappear myself, calm him down, keep my attention on him, right? Totally good survival strategies, not great survival strategies out in adults, right? Right. So it's like, then that becomes that what were good survival strategies are then maladaptive, but we can't not do them because they're totally embodied. They're a totally embodied pattern now. Yeah. So what somatics is so powerful at is recognizing what those patterns are, honoring the wisdom inside of them, and then helping us literally like uproot them from the soma and practice in new things. So there's a new embodied pattern that I can be and act from even under pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Well said.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Your work is so amazing. I love what you're saying. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, happy to.
This is profound.
I love the connection between this work as far as how it would apply to relationship work and relationship coaching, because a few minutes ago you talked about making requests and offers and having the communication skills that really help us to be humans at the next level, not at the animal based level. And I do so much work with people on the level of communication, and I just fundamentally believe that it is one of the most challenging and one of the most important skill sets for us to develop as humans, and very underemphasized in school and in most families of origin. And then connecting that to this trauma work and healing work and marginalization, it's like we need to have empowered communication on all sides of the equation to arrive at effective social change.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And it's very real with Black Lives Matter and everything we're seeing now. So I appreciate you for bringing that in. And I'd like to dive into the trauma piece as far as the individual versus the systemic trauma. And that helps us look at this lens of, social change and collective trauma. So individual trauma versus systemic trauma.
It's awesome. In some ways, individual trauma is always in this broader context of systemic trauma. But we might look at systemic trauma as something like homophobia. Like we're soaking in it. For, I'm just going to say queer people to do a very big umbrella. But for queer folks, it might be that you experience a hate crime. It might be that your family doesn't accept you or accepts you, right? There's going to be all these individual experiences, but then we're soaking in this broader pool of homophobia or heterosexism. And, we've come a long way in the last 20 years. I mean, I came out a long time ago and I'm like, wow, so much has changed just in my era. But when I look at that, like how many people who are queer have to do a deep kind of learning, a deep self-permission to just be who they are, right? Or like I think about queer clients I've had who went to Catholic school. Oh my God, the level of pain about who they are because they were considered a sin, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or a lot of queer people I know who need to do sexual healing because all the messaging has been like, you're bad and what you desire is bad, right? So then all of a sudden they're like, well, I was never sexually abused. Why do I need to do so much sexual healing? And it's like, oh, because of the systemic trauma, right? So that's some examples. Or like, there's this amazing teacher inside of Generative Somatics, and she's a Black woman, and her declaration, like I talked about, like her vision and the declaration she repeated is, and I might botch it up, but basically I'm a commitment to living inside my skin without apology.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because of how impacted she felt by white supremacy and racism her whole life. And she goes, I have nothing to apologize for. But it's like the systemic touches us very deeply, whether we have a, in quotes, direct experience of harm or we're just soaking in it. Then the individual traumas are, of course, the things we think about, like rape or sexual assault, right? Child abuse, child sexual abuse, hate crimes, right? Or neglect, right? That those are often in the field of psychotherapy, the things that people think about as traumatizing. And what's interesting is even if we trace those back, those are very individual experiences, but if we trace them back, well, first of all, often within the family, it's multi-generational. But often it also goes back to those abuses are also part of a domination-based worldview, right? So they still connect back to the broader piece. That doesn't mean they don't need deep addressing in and of themselves, but to me, it's why the interdependence of these are so important, and why I think therapeutic and trauma healing approaches that don't acknowledge the societal and economic experiences, I feel like a huge part of the picture is being left out. And then the healing is more, in some ways, limited. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Really, a lot. Yeah. I love that. I'm a commitment to living inside my skin
Without apology.
without apology.
Yeah. She's very powerful. Yeah.
That is very, very, very beautiful. And so, we've covered so much ground. This is so beautiful. So beautiful. So what is a somatic understanding of healing? Can you kind of unpack that?
Yeah. Yay. My favorite part.
Okay.
Yay. So, when we talked about safety, belonging, and dignity, what we're doing fundamentally in somatic healing is we're bringing safety, belonging, and dignity back into harmony. Oftentimes, because of our survival strategies and having to navigate harm or oppression, it's like we give up connection for safety, right? And then a survival strategy becomes, I'm going to isolate myself and actually stay disconnected, right? Or we give up dignity for belonging. Well, I'm just going to stay and I'm going to stay connected even though this person or this space doesn't respect me or dignify me, right? So trauma and oppression break safety, belonging, and dignity kind of apart from each other and put us in this idea of a false choice. We need all three to thrive. So what we're doing in somatic healing is basically going, okay, so let's get really curious about your longing and what you want. We always start with what we're moving toward. Somatic does not ask the question, what's wrong with you? We ask the question, what do you want? What do you long for? Like, what's pulling you? right? And because as we move toward what we long for, the things in the way of that are going to surface anyway, right? Somatics also tends to ask how more than why. So we don't oftentimes go, why are you like that? Why are you like that? Although that's fascinating. But why doesn't inherently transform us, right? Just having an insight about something doesn't necessarily change our embodied experience. So a lot of times we ask how, like, how do you know that? How does that happen inside of your body, right? There's a lot of how. So healing starts with, what do you long for? What do you want? Who are you wanting to become? How are you wanting to heal? Yeah. And then we really look at something that we call survival strategies, or we call conditioned tendencies, which are, what are all those adaptations that actually got you to here, but are in the way of the life, the contribution, the love, the parenting, right, that you want. And we start working with kind of two prongs. One is learning new practices that can almost offer a better option to that survival strategy. The very wise thing about our mind body or our psychobiology is the old way will not let go until there's a better way to take care of the same thing, right? So if, let's say, an appease response is part of a safety strategy, and there's no other way that the person knows to have boundaries, navigate complex situations, make requests, that appease strategy is just going to take over, and the person's going to appease because that is the best option. So one is practicing in new options to build choice, right? And those are somatic practices with a purpose inside of them. And then a big, big part of healing, obviously we do a lot around resilience, right? Find resilience, cultivate resilience, deepen resilience, because that softens and enlivens our whole system. Plus it's just so good for us. And then a big part of the healing, we teach hands-on body work in our methodology, because where things are caught in the soma, bringing our attention there helps. But when you have tissues and fascia that are kind of contracted or numbed, and they've been doing that for 25 years, it's a lot slower to just use your attention. It's a lot faster to move the tissues around. We do breath patterns and basically help the body shed, literally shed history. I've been blown away over and over again. Something in someone's body lets go through attention, breath work, and touch. And stories start pouring out of people's bodies. And people will say, I haven't thought of that in 25 years. I had no idea that was there still. It's like the body is in some ways our unconscious mind. And unless those holdings and contractions shift, there's always multiple boulders in the river. We're trying to clear the boulders out of the river, right? So things can actually flow, as much life as possible can move through us. So it's all that somatic opening work, somatic practices that are aligned with our vision and our values. And then, of course, there's deep emotional work. I mean, most of us learn to compartmentalize certain emotions. And we have this huge inherent range as human beings of going from awe, delight, joy, satisfaction to rage, despair, agony. And when we're hurt and there's not enough support to work through the hurt, we start contracting and compartmentalizing our emotions. And that also shows up in the body, right? So there's deep emotional work that's a part of course, somatic healing, like getting really to, in some ways, completely experiences that never got to get fully processed and instead got stored in the body. They get to emerge and we get to complete them now and get more into current time, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That is so beautiful. That I was wondering if, since we have about 10 more minutes, in the last 5 minutes we wrap it up and announce about who's coming on next week. So I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to lead us in, some exercise you love or a meditation
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Maybe we can go back to this resilience piece. We do a whole process called resilient storytelling, but maybe instead of storytelling, I'll just do it like as a visualization. Does that work?
That really works. That's great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, good. So I just want to first invite everyone to take a moment and let your attention get connected to your sensations. So that means dropping your attention really below the neck into your body. You might notice your breath moving in and out. Again, feeling it rather than conceptualizing it. Just really let yourself drop into the felt senses of your body. You might notice temperatures, places you're warmer, places you're cooler. You might also notice like pulsation or movement in your body. But just really invite yourself into your senses. Yeah? If you can, just take a nice long breath kind of down your spine. And relax your eyes into their sockets. And relax your jaw so your teeth aren't touching. And I'm going to invite all of us, I'll do it with you too, to remember or recall an experience that just brought you a lot of resilience. And get it as specific as possible. It was like listening to this particular type of music this certain time 5 years ago, right? Or where I'm going to go is I'm going to go to this hike I had in the Colorado Rockies with the pine trees, and the aspen trees were turning color. It was fall, it was October, right? Just take yourself to a specific experience of resilience that you can recall. Could be yesterday, could be 20 years ago. And just take a moment and really let yourself return there. Like, what are the smells? What are the sounds? And if you have a bunch of options running through your mind, that's fine. Just really choose one and then locate yourself back in that one. What's the temperature of where you're at? Are you just with yourself? Or are you with other people or animals or trees or beings? All right, now that you have yourself there, really again sink into that experience. And then start to notice what that feels like in your body. Maybe your chest and heart open more. Maybe you just feel this sense of connection, interdependence, oneness. Maybe you feel this quality of ground. Whatever it is for you, just really feel it in your body and let yourself open to that. Almost like you could really feel it and even let yourself feel it 2% more, 3% more. Being in that experience of resilience. Remembering what it was like. Feeling it. And then just notice inside of that experience, is there anything else that you can notice that can let it be even a little bit more resilient? Like I just noticed in mine, the dappled light off of the leaves and the feeling of dirt under my hands. Like, is there anything else in yours that lets you allow it to be even more resilience giving for you? Just keep allowing yourself to feel that and receive it. And if you can, receive it and feel it all the way down your body. So you feel it in your hips, you feel it in your lower body, your feet, your arms. Just let this resilience really inform your nervous system. We'll just take another few seconds here. And then whatever way feels right to you, just thank that resilience experience. And also thank yourself for being a resilient being. And then whenever you're ready, take a final breath and then let your attention come back out to our call here.
That was so cool. So great.
Good.
You have such a smooth facility with leading exercises. I can tell there's been many, 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 many of those under your belt over the years. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I hope our listeners got to do that little dive in and taste some of Staci's medicine. Beautiful little exercise on resiliency, and I'm guessing some of it is really repatterning ourselves to understand that the experiences in our lives are creating resiliency and what that gives us in a somatic sensation environment.
I love that. I got so inspired, I realized I'm going to start leading guided meditations on my Facebook page. That is like my happiest place. I mean, I'm being in nature. So that was very resilient and resourceful and inspiring. So I want to just thank you, Staci, for being here today. You've really given us a lot. You come with such a rich tapestry of experience to offer, and it's really feeding our heart, mind, body, and soul, which is why we're doing this show. So I can't wait to have more interaction with you, and people can find you with the information that they'll see on the archives. So we have archives. People who are watching this now, you can watch it again. You can share it with your friends. Please send it far and wide. And come back next Thursday. We always have a wonderful show. We want to thank Scott Katamas and the Love Coach Academy. And Kamela, who can you share about who is going to be on next week?
Yeah, so next week we have a very dear friend of mine, Ria Yoshida, who is a really dynamic relationship coach and works in the space of helping people move through sexual shame and guilt and become really empowered in their relationships. And she is a body worker. She got her master's degree in social organizational psychology at Columbia University. So she has a very eclectic way of working with clients, and I am sure that you will love our conversation next week. So join us, same place, same time. It's every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And just on our way out, we want to give Staci a big, big, big thank you. This was a really powerful conversation, and I look forward to growing our relationship more with you over time. And thank you for joining us.
You are so welcome. It was really delightful to be with you all and just get to flow. And I realized that I forgot to say and would like to say that I have a new book out, The Politics of Trauma, Somatics, Healing and Social Justice. And we also have a 10-session somatics trauma and healing online program starting next week. Folks can find out more about that through strozieinstitute.com, their online programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you
for adding that. Yep.
Thank you. And we're going to say it's the hour. So we're going to say goodbye to our whoever's been watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. And please share this with your friends. All the best. See you next Thursday.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.